Okay. Now, boys and girls, if you remember last Saturday matinee, we were left hanging by our fingernails when William Bonney was taking this place apart through his own imperative. Well, we're going to find out what happens next. I'm going to bring up Beacon's poet laureate, Peter Ullian, fellow Landsman, dear friend. I love the book so far. Brace yourselves. Come on, Peter, let's have some fun.
How's that look? I'm going to read from the second part of the memoirs of William H. Bonney, aka Billy the Kid. Just two quick things I want to mention before I do. One, I want to shamelessly take a moment of shameless self-promotion and mention that I have a story that's going to come out in October in an online journal called Frontier Tales Magazine. It is also a Western, but rather than about Billy the Kid, it's about another historical character who's not as well known, Emil Harris, who was the only Jewish policeman in frontier Los Angeles in the 1870s, and who doggedly pursued Tiburcio Vasquez, the last Californio Bandito. So that's what that story's about. It comes out in October. It's free to read online, frontiertalesmagazine.com. You can also vote for your favorite story for the October issue, which may not be mine, but it might be. And if it is, I encourage you to exercise your franchise. I also wanted to quickly mention, I just found out, I don't think this is even, it's not on his Facebook page yet, but the great playwright from the off-Broadway movement of the 60s, Jean-Claude Van Natale, has just passed away. He's most famous for America Hurrah, which caused a huge sensation when it was produced in 1966. And later in his career, he created some very well-acclaimed translations of Chekhov. He was also one of my teachers back in college, and I've stayed in touch with him over the years. He was one of those people, as a writer, you probably all know what I'm talking about. There's a handful of people who really help you kind of unleash who you are as a writer, and he was definitely one of those people. I don't know whether this is not very Jean-Claude Van Natale, what I'm about to read, but on one level or another, he helped unleash the writer that I became, who wrote this. So thank you for that, Jean-Claude. Okay, so if you guys were here last time, you remember that young William H. Bonney, before he's a famous outlaw, he's just a gambler and a horse thief. He's still a teenager. He's living in Camp Grant in Arizona. And he's fallen in love with Bonnie Byrne, a young prostitute who he has decided he wants to marry. Of course, I knew nothing about marrying, nor even about courting, but I figured I couldn't know much less than most at Camp Grant or nearby, so I improvised. Sunday was the sporting ladies' day off, so I bought myself some store-bought clothes and sat beside Bonnie in church on Sundays. Although I ain't never been much of a churchgoer, there weren't much else to do at Camp Grant or nearby on a Sunday. And afterwards, we take long walks in the foothills surrounding the camp. We kiss under the starlight, but I never tried for more, mindful of the fact that until I asked her to marry me, I had not the right to expect for free that which she did for a living. Even so, at the same time every week, night after night, as a horse thief and gambler, I did not have to wait for regular paydays to have cash, but it was a good time to win at cards. Bonnie and I had our ritual at Madame Rose's. It was while on one of these walks in the foothills, oops, sorry, I went a little too far. Here we go. It was while on one of our walks in the foothills surrounding Camp Grant that I got down on one knee and proposed to Bonnie with a ring I'd ordered from the Montgomery Ward catalog and waited for 6 weeks to arrive. "But Billy," Bonnie said, "I'm nothing but a whore." "You ain't," I said, "and I love you." "But Billy," she said, "you ain't nothing but an ex-teamster, a gambler, and a horse thief." This stung me. "I work hard for a decent dollar," I said, I thought, reasonably. "But what kind of future is there in it?" Bonnie said. "How much money can you save after you paid your expenses and paid a visit to Madame Rose's?" "Well," I said, "I wouldn't visit Madame Rose's no more." "And we live in the bunkhouse?" she said. I hadn't considered that. Most teamsters lived in the bunkhouse, but of course, I didn't anymore since I'd taken to horse thieving. Still, I didn't make enough to regularly afford my own room, and I moved a lot from place to place. "We could live in a tent," I said. Some teamsters and others lived in tents set up on an open field nearby the camp. "I ain't living in no tent," Bonnie said, "not as a married woman." "Well, I wouldn't want you living in Madame Rose's no more," I said. "You'd be my wife. I wouldn't want you working there no more neither." "Would I be your wife, or would you be my pimp?" she asked. That burned me to the marrow. I hoped you'd give up that life once we were married. "But what would we live on, Billy?" "Would we live on love?" "We'd find a way," I said. "People say that," Bonnie said wistfully, "but most of them never do." "We will," I insisted. "I promise." "I ain't gonna live on promises and hope," Bonnie said. "I ain't even gonna live on love. Since I was orphaned, there ain't been no promises made I could ever count on, and no person neither but for me. Madame Rose treats me good, and I'm saving my money. And eventually, I'm gonna go into business for myself and open up my own house of assignation. I got a plan. I ain't gonna let you and me muck it up." I was confused. "But how are you making so much money? When you spend the entire night with me?" Bonnie looked at me with pity in her eyes. "Billy, most men take their payday and gamble with it before they visit a whorehouse. The ones that win at cards keep me busy all week long." Why do I get such special attention then? You could just as easily go through 10 customers in the time we spend together." Bonnie smiled sadly. "You are special, Billy. I'm the best earner at Madame Rose's, so you're my reward. Besides, the girls love you, so your visits give them joy as well. And you mostly visit on slow nights, since you quit teamstering and make your purse horse thieving and gambling. Plus, we charge you several times more than we charge our other customers." I had no idea. I was paying a lot extra for spending my time with Bonnie. Not that it wasn't worth it. "I hope this won't mean an end to your visits on regular nights, Billy," she said, "nor our afternoons on Sundays." I assured her it wouldn't, but I won't deny I was damn disappointed. I walked into George Atkins' cantina that night feeling dumb as a rock. Bonnie was fond of me, but she weren't in love with me. Even if she weren't interested in marrying me. I didn't like whiskey, but I ordered some anyway and choked it down, sitting there with my body shuddering in disgust afterwards. "Kid," I heard a voice say, "you're a goddamn pimp." I turned and looked at Windy Cahill standing there, looking wide as a mountain. His neck alone was thicker than my entire body. He was glaring at me, as he often did when I passed him after leaving Madame Rose's or any other time, truth be told. He farted, as was his way, long and loud. He liked to tell people they called him Windy Cahill because he was long-winded, but that weren't the reason. His flatulence called most of the saloon to attention, and most eyes were now upon us. Feeling the silence, Windy Cahill broke wind again. I was feeling ill-tempered, so I replied, "You're a flatulent son of a bitch." Giving credence to my assertion, Windy Cahill farted again. "And you're a goddamn pimp," he repeated and farted. "And you're a goddamn flatulent son of a bitch," I said. And then Windy Cahill swung on me. What I only learned later is that Windy Cahill had eyes for Bonnie, but he was too damn stupid, as I had learned most of the men in the camp were, to go to the cat house after payday before he went playing cards. He gambled first, always lost all his money, often to me, and never had enough to afford Bonnie, who was the most expensive sporting lady at Madame Rose's. That was why he was always glaring at me, and that was the foundation of his deep enmity towards me, since the special attention Bonnie showed me was not a secret around Camp Grant. Now, I previously mentioned that I had never killed a man before, but I had been in more than my share of brawls, and I had learned a thing or two about brawling with a bigger man. Windy Cahill probably would have taken my head clean off if he had connected, but what I lacked in brawn, I made up for in spryness. I ducked and his swing went wide, and this knocked him off his balance. I came up hard, my fists clapped together, and I hit him in his jaw. I put my entire weight into it, such as it was, and while maybe it was not much, it was enough coming at him with all my speed directed at his jaw. Windy Cahill came off his feet about 3 inches into the air from the floor, then returned to earth on his back with a loud crash when he first hit a cable which collapsed underneath him and then hit the floor. He lay there, groaning. Both my hands hurt like hell. I shook them and examined them, then to examine one, then the other, to make sure they weren't broken. I felt pain from my knuckles through my shoulders. By this time, Windy Cahill was staggering to his feet. He shook his head to clear it, got a bead on me, and charged. I grabbed a whiskey bottle from the bar and brought it down on his head, dodging to his side when he reached me. Windy Cahill's face went into the bar and bounced off its edge. Blood poured from his face as he crumpled to the floor. He sat slumped on the bar, stock still. I wondered if I'd killed him. I grabbed another whiskey bottle from the bar, and this one I took a plug from to steady my nerves. This one went down easier than the last. I don't like whiskey, but sometimes it has its uses. But the whiskey went down a lot easier, it turned out, than did Windy Cahill, because he was pulling himself up to his feet again, a hand the size of a bear paw grabbing the edge of the bar. I took the bottle I had in my hand and I smashed it as well atop his head. He lost his grip on the bar and crumpled to the floor, farting away. He sure was earning his sobriquet. I turned around and headed towards the door, but then all of a sudden he had his hand wrapped around my ankle. He yanked and my feet went out from under me. I fell hard on my face, and luckily it turned out I managed to roll over on my back just before Cahill was on top of me, straddling my chest, his knees pinning my arms. He hit me first on one side of the face with a fist the size and weight of an iron skillet. My vision exploded into a cascade of stars, and my nostrils closed up at his stench. Then he hit me again with another fist on the other side of my face, repeating the process almost precisely. I squirmed and struggled and writhed and wriggled and flopped and flailed, but all to no avail. Windy Cahill had me pinned, but good. There was no escape from his sitting on my chest and raining blows upon me, upon my face, each swing of a fist as massive as a Mexican saddle. I figured if the blows didn't kill me, his wind probably would. And then he wrapped both hands around my neck and started to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze harder. And I realized he was surely going to kill me. I tried to reason with him, but the grip he had around my throat made it impossible for me to speak. I had no breath, neither in nor out. I tried to employ hand gestures, but with his knees pinning down my arms, I could only gesture from the elbows to the hands, and I didn't think he could see that. I tried pleading with him with my eyes, but Windy Cahill didn't seem to view the eyes as the window to the soul, or maybe he did and just didn't care for what he found there in my own. Then I discovered I could just barely reach one of my 2 6-shooters in my belt. Just about the only thing I could reach in any direction, my reach shortened by the pinning of my arms under Windy Cahill's knees. It were the same 6-shooter I had stole from my stepfather. I had never used it against no man, but I had become adept at shooting rabbits with it, as well as shooting baubles off fence posts. Of course, this situation called not for marksmanship, but simply for pointing and pulling a trigger. As my vision began to black, I could see no alternative. There was nothing else for it. And so, I managed to wriggle the pistol from my belt pointed it at his side, cocked the hammer with my thumb, and fired. I repeated this process until I emptied the six-shooter into Windy Cahill. At first, Windy Cahill didn't seem to even notice. Then his eyes grew wide with alarm at the realization that something was amiss. Then his eyes rolled up inside of his head, and he loosened his grip on my throat and fell down upon me. The dead weight of him atop me was almost as strangulating as the living hands around my throat. I felt his warm blood pouring out on me, but I could not throw off his corpse, which felt about the size of a bear's. Finally, I wriggled out from under him and sat on the floor beside him, gasping to get my breath back. When my breath returned, I looked about me and saw all eyes upon me. "Y'all seen it," I said. "It were self-defense." "Windy didn't have no pistol, kid," I heard someone say. "If I hadn't shot him, he'd have killed me for sure," I said. But looking at the faces in the saloon, looking back at me with a combination of pity and concern, I realized that my days at or nearby Camp Grant were over. "Say goodbye to Bonnie for me, boys," I said. "Tell her I'd have asked her to come with me if I'd been headed for any kind of a life fit for a girl like her." And with that, I stumbled out of the saloon, stole a horse, and lighted out for parts unknown. Now, I was mighty lonesome and downhearted on the trail that night, and for many nights after. My dreams of Bonnie shattered by her refusal, and my own predicament, my prospects degraded quite considerably now that I had relegated myself from common scofflaw to murderous desperado, and me, still 17. As I made my escape, I stopped periodically upon my way, dropping off my stolen horse and asking that it be returned from whence it came, before stealing another and riding on, repeating the process at regular intervals. That way, I figured I weren't so much stealing as borrowing. I bummed around for a while. I joined up with another theatrical troupe for a time and brought tears to the eyes of many a man with my portrayal of Hamlet. Again, I got caught in flagrante with the wife of the impresario. She played Ophelia, and he played Claudius, and I had to flee. Eventually, I fell in with a band of horse thieves that called themselves the Boys, run by Jesse Evans and James Kinney, who were later renamed the Banditti Boys by the newspapers. We wrestled horses for a while and generally raised hell every time we came to a town or saloon. I was able to afford 2 pistols instead of 1 off the profits we made rustling them horses, and I became real good at using them and even better at riding, impressing the Banditti boys with my shooting tricks I performed while hanging off the side of my mare as she ran all out at full gallop. But I got bored of this pretty quick. While I enjoyed cutting loose as much as the next guy, these boys had a cruel streak in them that I didn't cotton to. They like to shoot at the feet of respectable citizens and make them dance, just like you read about in them dime novels and them half-dime novels, which, in point of fact, was where they got the idea for this practice. Everywhere they left wreckage in their wake, broken windows, broken chairs, and broken bones, littering town streets with spent cartridges from shooting off their pistols as they did at every random drunken revelry. I split from them and decided to make my way back to New Mexico, where my mother had told me we had family. My grandfather Bonnie had gone to New Mexico after he left his family in Ireland, and his daughter had married into the Salazar family, who had a ranch in New Mexico. I set out to find them, a letter of introduction from my mother in my pocket, which she had provided, one to me and one to my brother Joseph, before she died, for just such a purpose. When I made my escape from the bed of my Juliet all those months before, it were the only of my possessions I managed to procure and carry with me as I fled through the night upon a stolen horse. My trip to the Salazar Ranchero was more complicated than I'd have preferred. I was waylaid by Apaches, and my pony was stolen. They left me my pistols and my Winchester, but even I knew I couldn't outshoot what looked to be the Apache Nation entire. I walked the rest of the way through hot, inhospitable terrain, desert and scrub and spiny cacti and yucca, carrying my saddle on my shoulder. By the time I arrived, I was near death and all cut to pieces. I handed the note to the woman who met me, who turned out to be my Aunt Paula, and collapsed. The Salazars kindly nursed me back to health. Although I think they never fully accepted my claims to a familial relationship, they seemed to like me well enough. Later, I taught Hugo, their son, who were about my age, how to shoot. And I impressed the family with my ability to ride and shoot while hanging off the side of my horse, which I had mentioned previously I had occasion to learn when I rode with the Banditti boys. I was all nursed back to health and wondering where my next move would take me the day the Horrell brothers arrived. And next time I will read to you about William H. Bonney's encounter with the villainous Horrell brothers. Thank you.
I feel like I'm at the movies. The lights were flickering and everything. Gotta get the smell of popcorn. Well, we could go on and on, but I think that's a nice trajectory. And just the tack, you were brilliant tonight. Peter, you're always a gas. And Clayton, that was a great new set of stuff you read tonight. I liked it very much. Arkansas, yeah. The Bowie knife, the Arkansas toothpick. Anyway, my name is Hayden Wayne. This is the Howland Cultural Center. Peace.